Jayson Tatum is one of the best explanations that I can look at for why the Warriors are struggling this year. The Warriors are one of the few reigning champions that we've seen in modern history that have struggled as much as they have immediately after winning a championship. Now, I think this has to do with the fact that they rely heavily on a young core that doesn't have the opportunity to make all the mistakes that you really need to make as a young player while trying to develop your game and to understand what's required of them to become a champion in the NBA. Now, I know that a lot of these players are champions because they won last year. But if you look at the lineups that Steve Kerr played, especially as they got further along in the postseason, there were times when people like me were like, you need to play Jonathan Kuminga. He's such a great athletic asset on defense. I thought, okay, this will be a great matchup for him going up against other athletic two-way players like Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but Steve Kerr elected to have him ride the bench except for a few minutes that he would get in when they were playing in garbage time. Now, we saw this played out mightily with James Wiseman in the first part of the year because he was drafted really early in his draft class, and of course we have a lot of expectations of players that are drafted as highly as he was. And yes, he is one of the most skilled big men coming out of his draft class. And yes, I also understand that he suffered a lot of injuries that prevented him from playing last year. But once he was able to play this year, the thing that we were able to figure out was that it just really did not work for him to play in a system behind Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson. The thing about the Golden State Warriors is that they have their supporting cast really support the offensive productivity of Stephen Curry. So a lot of plays are run to get Stephen Curry open, especially the way that they choose to use their big men. They don't play through their big men. And let me just tell you something. Yes, these guys could have grown up worshiping Stephen Curry, being amazed by what he could do. But if you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in your draft class, you want to prove to the world that there's a reason why, and you're looking to make your mark in the NBA. James Wiseman was a player who accepted the fact that he was playing with one of the best players in the world, a four-time champion. But I think there's always going to be that part of a young guy that's like, I want to show what I can do. Play through me. I want to get my reps. And I think that he struggled. So their answer to that was to play him intermittently, which I'm going to get to as it relates to some of the other players on their team now, and then to also put him in the G League and have the owner come and celebrate the success he had in the G League, where he's going to get the playing time, where he's going to be that guy, and where he can have that feeling. But at the end of the day, no player is going to get the rush that they will get from being the main guy. And if we watched him on Detroit, where we have a team full of players that are young and who no one has very high expectations of as far as a postseason run, he's flourishing in that system because no one is asking him to play behind anyone. They're all playing together, they're all getting their moment, and they're all learning. And I'm not trying to say that the young players on the Golden State Warriors are not learning from the successes that they have, from the mentorship and the close proximity to such great players like Stephen Curry, such great basketball minds like Draymond Green and Steve Kerr. But it's not the same thing to be able to go out there game after game, make your mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and not have this pressure on you that if you do make those mistakes and your team loses, you're risking championship opportunities and positioning going into the postseason. And what I see is a breakdown. So when I say a breakdown, I'm seeing young guys want to perform at a high level, but they're being thrown into these very random, again, I use the word intermittent lineups. So one night you might get 19 minutes and you're doing really well, but then they take you out at the end of the game. The next game, you're playing almost the entire game and you're able to get off and do something crazy. And then in the next game, you've got to figure out how to make the adjustment to support Stephen Curry getting off offensively, because we know that he is that guy and he should be getting most of the reps because he's Stephen Curry and he's the greatest shooter to ever play the game. And he is a 4-time champion over the last decade. No one over here in this space where I'm at is suggesting that they should play through these young guys. But all I'm trying to point out is that this situation is not ideal for a younger player who has to be in a safe space to make mistakes in order to learn and grow. And I was saying to a friend of mine, they have to trade James Wiseman. It's never going to work because he's never going to be able to get in that mindset of Kevon Looney, a guy who has embraced the role of being the guy that gets Stephen Curry open, being the guy that helps Stephen Curry defensively when he's outmatched physically by a bigger guard who's making his way to the basket, of really paying attention to Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson's movement to get in ideal spaces, again, to get them open. A young player who is as skilled as James Wiseman was coming into the league is going to want to be more of an AD, more of a Jokic, more of an Embiid. They're aspiring to something a little bit higher than being a role player or a journeyman basketball player whose role is to support that top in the situation. So what I see with some of these younger players on the team now, Jonathan Kuminga, even Jordan Poole, is a level of pressure being placed on them that isn't, I'm not going to use the word fair because it's not about fair. It's more like it's not realistic to believe that players as young as these players are going to give you a level of consistency that you would expect from rookies who are way more talented than they are. And I'm saying that with all due respect. If we look at young players that were extremely talented, going back to my initial statement, Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum is an amazing offensive and defensive player who has struggled to win when it really counts. He's had his moments, and no one is sitting over here judging it, but last year there was this great opportunity for this team to win, and they got outmatched by a team that was more experienced and had more basketball IQ and was able to manage the basketball way better than they were because of experience. And it's taken him 5 years to get to that point. And it's arguable that this year the Boston Celtics may face the same result for reasons that we can discuss in another video. But my point is, Jonathan Kuminga, Jordan Poole, and some of these other young guys that they have had 1 or 2 years. And in those 1 or 2 years, they didn't get to play the number of minutes that Jayson Tatum has played or the number of minutes that Ja Morant has played. And we're expecting these young players to be the predictable, reliable, supportive cast to one of the greatest shooters in the world, Stephen Curry, in a winning effort to get another championship in a conference that is way more competitive than it's been in years, and frankly, an NBA that's more competitive than it's been in years. And I think that that is not a realistic outlook for a team that has some aging veterans who are becoming more defensive liabilities, and a team full of players who are not getting enough time on the floor to give you a level of consistent output. And they simply do not have the space to make the errors that you have to make on the way to becoming that great role player, that great second player, that great whatever lane you're in. But those are my thoughts. I know that people have differing opinions, so please leave your thoughts in the comment section, whether you agree with me or not. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. Subscribe to the channel, and I'm out.